Welcome to this video series on Catholic approach to palliative care. Palliative care is a relatively new branch of medicine, especially designed for people living with serious or advanced illness. Multiple research studies show that people with serious illness feel better, get the kind of medical care that matches their values and priorities, and sometimes even live longer when they receive palliative care. Each of these videos will introduce a topic that is important to people of faith who are living with serious illness. In this 6-part video series, we will discuss palliative care, advanced care planning, explore the Christian roots of palliative care, and the special importance of the sacraments of baptism and the Eucharist to people living with advanced illness. Consider the important work of being a caregiver for someone who has advanced illness. Each video is about 20 minutes and has a discussion guide to go with it. We encourage you to watch the videos in a group parish setting and take the time after the video to discuss what you've watched. Each discussion guide also has links to resources to help you learn more about the uniquely Catholic approach to palliative care. These videos have been viewed by multiple health ministry teams, parish nurses across the U.S., and endorsed by Catholic leaders like myself. We hope that they will be a blessing for you as you live with or care for people who are living with serious illness. If you have additional questions or would like more resources, please feel free to visit the Supportive Care Coalition's website. Thank you, and may the peace of Christ be with you always.
Six months ago, my mother went to God. I had been accompanying her to and from the hospital for the last 3 months of her life, but for the 10 years prior to her death, my mother had been a dialysis patient. She died a month before her 94th birthday. She lived a rich life. She lived a beautiful life. She lived a holy life. She was the mother of 11. She was married to the love of her life for 65 plus years, and she was the grandmother of 33 and the great-grandmother of 36. On her last hospitalization, I was called to the emergency room, and as I arrived at the door, my mother looked up from her stretcher and said to me, "Honey, I think we're done with dialysis now, and I think that it's time for me to come home to get ready to go home." And then she set an example for us that we will live with until we follow her example in her dying. We went home. My mother lived with me, and within 24 hours her children had gathered and many of her grandchildren had gathered. And for the last 4 days of her life, we never left her side, and she never stopped teaching us. We prayed, we sang her favorite hymns, and she talked about where she was going, or where she hoped she was going. We had lost a brother to pancreatic cancer about 12 years before Mom died, and our brother Mark had really shown us all the way in which to prepare to meet his God, and my mother referred to that very often. My father, who died between Mark and Mom, did the same thing. So we knew the drill. So as I say, for the last 4 days, my mother was never alone. She was actually in the middle of a crowd, and she would choose her hymns. She would pray along with us. We all got moments to just have those really important last conversations with her, and through it all, we knew how blessed we were. We knew that she had set the stage for a beautiful, wonderful, meaningful, and blessed time. 1 minute before she breathed her last breath, she looked around and said to all of us, and our family is sizable, as you could gather from the numbers. There were about 100 people in her bedroom. She looked at each one of us and said, "You're all wonderful, and I love you very much." And 90 seconds later, she was with God. The lessons that we learned in those 4 days were just a continuation of that which she had taught us all of our lives. But it was as though she had saved the best for last. And I hope that when it's my time and with some of our other loved ones, we will be able to recreate those days. That would be our final tribute to Mom and the best gift God could give us.
My dad had survived cancer twice, 2 different types of cancer, and it was something he was incredibly proud of. Yet, to address the cancer, he'd had multiple surgeries for the cancer and then for other complications afterwards. And his poor belly and abdomen had been opened numerous times by surgery. Well, later in his life then, because of all of those complications, he developed these fistulas. He literally had these unhealed wounds that he had to nurse. He did a pretty good job taking care of all of that. Meanwhile, he was also the primary caregiver for my mom, who was homebound with multiple sclerosis. Dad was excellent at managing the many different caregivers and things of the household, and we really wanted to keep Dad as healthy as possible because we wanted to help fulfill Mom's dream of being able to stay in her home until she died, or at least as long as absolutely possible. So myself and my other family members, we did all that we could to support Dad and the household, and Mom as well. But then finally the day came when Dad got a really bad bowel blockage. This one was not healing on its own. He was hospitalized, and the team really didn't want to have to do surgery because they knew that his body was just so frail. But there was one surgeon at a university medical center who was willing to perform a surgery, but it was going to be incredibly risky. There was an alternative, but it would have meant ongoing chronic conditions for Dad that would have been even more difficult than what he had been living with. You know, I'd gotten many different specialists to consult with Dad, including a palliative care team. Yet in the end, we simply had to stand by Dad and honor whatever decision that he made. Dad decided for the risky surgery. It really made me quite nervous, but I simply knew that I had to reassure Dad that no matter what he decided, that I loved him and that I would be there with him and for him. So the surgery came. And incredibly, the surgeons came out a little sooner than they had anticipated with really good news. The surgery had gone much quicker and actually quite easier than they had anticipated. Dad went back to the regular hospital floor and within a day or two was walking a little bit, was being mobile, but then he couldn't sustain the recovery any longer. One day they had to whisk him off to the intensive care unit, and his body simply could not recover. I was asking Dad to maybe give it another day or two to see if this infection would be able to subside with the medications. It needed time. But then after another day or two, Dad simply said he was ready for hospice. There was no more fixing. It was simply we had to affirm Dad's decision to let him know that no matter what happened, we would accompany him, we would be there with him, and that we would love him. And so we made arrangements to get Dad back home where he could be close to Mom, where he could be at a hospice house, and he could live out the remainder of his days as peacefully and as comfortably as possible with our family surrounding him. And that's what we did. We simply were there for him and with him to the very end.
Hello, and welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Denise Hess, and I'm the Executive Director of the Supportive Care Coalition. Today, we will be looking at the experience of being a caregiver, whether as a family member or friend or professional caregiver. This video is for all of the mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, daughters, sons, and professional caregivers who provide care for people living with a serious illness. We will look at the challenges of being a caregiver and the opportunities, specifically the opportunity to approach caregiving as a path of spiritual growth and transformation. Our guide for today will be Henry Nouwen, a Catholic priest and author most well known for his surprising decision to leave a very prestigious career at Harvard Divinity School to become a member of the L'Arche Daybreak community, a community for people with intellectual disabilities and their caregivers. Nouwen wrote a book about this life transition in his book, Journey to Daybreak, which tells the story of Nouwen's own spiritual transformation as he became the full-time companion and caregiver for Adam, an intellectually disabled man who couldn't speak and needed assistance with most of his daily activities, like dressing, feeding, and bathing himself. After years of daily care and companionship, Nouwen went from having strong feelings of inadequacy as a caregiver to being able to say Adam became his friend, his teacher, and his guide. This book, A Spirituality of Caregiving, tells the story of Nouwen's time at Daybreak and the personal transformation he experienced as he began to view caregiving not just as a set of tasks that he felt inadequate to accomplish, but as a relationship of mutual exchange, of giving and receiving. Through his time at Daybreak and his relationship with Adam, Nouwen came to see the primary spiritual task of caregiving as being with rather than doing for. Let's listen to Nouwen's own words from this book. Upon my arrival at Daybreak in August 1986, I met Adam for the first time. Although a very precious and gentle man, Adam was the most severely disabled person in our community at the time. I was soon asked to help Adam in the morning to get ready for his day. Helping Adam meant waking up at 7 a.m., bathing him and shaving him, choosing his clothing and dressing him, combing his hair, walking him to the kitchen where I prepared his breakfast, sitting with him and supporting him to eat and drink, brushing his teeth, putting on his coat, gloves, and cap, helping him to his wheelchair, and wheeling him to his day program a few hundred yards away. I was aghast. I simply didn't think I could do this. What if he falls? How do I support him as he walks? What if I hurt him and he can't tell me? What if he has a seizure? I don't even know how to dress him. So many things can go wrong. In those early days, I saw Adam as someone who was very different from me. I didn't have any expectation of developing a relationship with him because Adam was unable to speak. Adam often looked at me and followed me with his eyes, but he didn't speak or respond to anything I asked him. Adam didn't smile when I did something well or protest when I made a mistake. I wondered if he even recognized me. How would I get to know him? Well, gradually, very gradually, things started to change. I was more confident and relaxed. I learned that Adam could communicate. I found myself beginning to understand Adam's language. It didn't seem to matter anymore that he couldn't respond in words. We were together, growing in friendship, and I was glad to be there with him. The tables were turning. Adam was becoming my teacher. Adam simply lived, and by his life invited me to receive his unique gift, a gift wrapped in weakness, but given for my transformation. While I tended to worry about what I did and how much I could produce, Adam was announcing to me that being is more important than doing. While I was preoccupied with the way I was talked about or written about, Adam was quietly telling me that God's love is more important than the praise of people. And while I was concerned about my individual accomplishments, Adam was reminding me that doing things together is more important than doing things alone. Adam couldn't produce anything. He had no fame to be proud of, couldn't brag of any award or trophy, but by his very life, he was the most radical witness to the truth of our lives that I have ever encountered. What Nouwen is pointing to here is that deep within every person that has ever lived, as people made in God's image, there is a built-in response to suffering, and that response is called compassion. Compassion is more than just empathy. Compassion is not only feeling with someone who is suffering, but also taking specific action to ease the suffering of another. Easing another's pain, bringing peace to replace fear, speaking words of comfort. These are all examples of compassionate actions. One of the best examples of God's compassionate love is in the parable Jesus tells about the two sons and their compassionate father. This story, often referred to as the parable of the prodigal son and depicted here in this painting by Rembrandt, is about a son who asks for his inheritance while his father is still living, leaves home, spends all the money, and then decides to return home to his father's house, hoping to live there again as a servant, not as a son. But this story is even more about a compassionate father who sees his wayward son coming home down the road, which means he was watching and hoping for his son's return. And when the father sees his son, the father runs toward his son with his arms open wide. And before the son can even start his well-rehearsed speech asking for his father's forgiveness, his father has already begun planning a party to celebrate his son's return. This is compassion. This is love. This is the call of the caregiver. But is this kind of compassion really possible? After all, caregivers are not God. Caregivers, like everyone, are just fallible, imperfect human beings who make mistakes, who have regrets, who get frustrated, even feel resentment and anger toward those they are caring for. Caregivers hold immense responsibility for those they care for and for themselves. There are other tasks to be done, bills to pay, friendships to maintain, personal health to look after. Professional caregivers may be underpaid or undervalued for their work. Caregivers for family members or friends may be criticized for others for not doing enough or doing too much. Or caregivers may feel resentment and anger toward other family members who are less involved, or when they do get involved, they do more harm than good. Caregivers may feel that their care is not appreciated or even noticed by those receiving their care. There are many, many challenges to caregiving, many of which have to do with being confronted by our own weakness, our own limitations, our own lack of control, our own inability to fix all of the things that can so easily go wrong. Yet there are also many, many rewards of caregiving, and paradoxically, these often come not as we somehow become a perfect caregiver or stop feeling resentful or deny that we might sometimes feel lonely and isolated, but instead, these rewards come, as Nouwen and others would tell us, as we offer our whole and vulnerable selves to the others we are caring for. The challenge of caregiving is that it brings the caregiver and the care receiver face to face with their own limitations and weakness. Yet, as weakness is embraced, healing and transformation begin. And this transformation happens through simple acts of compassion, genuine listening, extending empathy, and developing relationships with those we care for as equals in the eyes of God. But if we listen and extend empathy and build relationships with those we care for, won't we get tired? Won't we risk becoming burned out? Well, caregiver burnout is a real issue for caregivers. The weight of responsibility combined with the day-to-day stress of providing care can lead to physical, emotional, and even spiritual fatigue. And if help isn't available, this fatigue can lead to burnout. Too many caregivers are alone, exhausted, and in need of help. Caregivers often put their needs last and don't ask others for help. Gathering a network of support, having others to talk to about the real struggles of caregiving, and taking time to engage in activities that bring joy, renewal, and rest are key to avoiding burnout. And one of the best ways to prevent burnout is to regularly connect to the meaning, purpose, and blessing of caregiving. As Nouwen said in his description of caring for Adam, the tables were turning. Adam was becoming my teacher. Adam simply lived, and by his life invited me to receive his unique gift, a gift wrapped in weakness, but given for my transformation. By his very life, he was the most radical witness to the truth of our lives that I have ever encountered. Jesus talks about this blessing of caring for others in the Gospel of Matthew when he says that when we care for the sick, the stranger, or the prisoner, we are caring for him. Or in the words of another author, Victor Hugo, to love another person is to see the face of God. As we see God's face in the face of those we care for, we are changed, we are transformed, and we are blessed. So what Nouwen is pointing to in his description of the spiritual journey of caregiving is a ministry of presence. While caregiving does indeed involve what may seem like endless lists of tasks, Nouwen is calling us to look beyond just the tasks we do to the presence we bring to those we care for. Caregiving carries within it an opportunity for inner healing, liberation, and transformation for the one being cared for and the one who cares. To close, I would like to read a blessing for all the caregivers who are listening from the poet John O'Donohue. May you embrace the beauty in what you do and how you stand like a secret angel between the bleak despair of illness and the unquenchable light of spirit that can turn the darkest destiny toward dawn. May you never doubt the gifts you bring, and rather learn from these frontiers wisdom for your own heart. May you come to inherit the blessings of your kindness and never be without care and love when winter enters your own life. May it be so. Amen, and thank you.